I spent months believing I was unhireable, staring at rejection emails that arrived like clockwork right after the background checks. It wasn't until I heard my mother's voice drip with fake sympathy that I realized the sabotage was coming from inside the house. They were systematically destroying my reputation to force me back under their thumb. What they didn't know was that my grandmother had seen this coming years ago, and she had left me the ammunition to fight back. The fluorescent lights of the Ridgeview Logistics conference room hummed with a sound that usually gave me a headache, but today it sounded like opportunity. I sat across from the operations director, a man named Marcus, who had spent the last hour nodding enthusiastically at my answers. I had rehearsed for this moment for weeks. I had practiced my answers in the cracked mirror of my bathroom, timing my pauses, ensuring my smile reached my eyes, but did not look desperate. I needed this job. I needed it in a way that went beyond paying rent or buying groceries. I needed it to prove that I was a person who existed outside the shadow of the house I had grown up in. I was 33 years old, and I was starting over in Marrow Glen, a town just big enough to get lost in and small enough to feel like a community. Marcus closed the manila folder in front of him and leaned back, linking his fingers behind his head. "Eliana, I have to say," he said, his voice warm and professional, "you are exactly what we have been looking for. Your experience with supply chain management is impressive, but it is your problem-solving scores that really stand out. We have a lot of fires to put out here, and you look like someone who knows how to handle a hose." I felt a tightness in my chest loosen, a knot that had been there for 6 months. "Thank you, Marcus," I said. "I thrive in high-pressure environments. I like making order out of chaos." He laughed. "Well, we have plenty of chaos. Look, I cannot make an official offer until HR runs the standard checks. But between you and me, you should keep your phone on tomorrow. I want to fast-track this." I walked out of that building feeling like I was floating. The air outside was crisp, smelling of damp asphalt and pine needles, the specific scent of Pennsylvania in late autumn. I sat in my sedan, a 10-year-old vehicle that rattled when it idled, and I gripped the steering wheel. I allowed myself to breathe. I allowed myself to imagine buying a new duvet cover, maybe even a coffee maker that did not leak. I called my best friend, Jules, who lived 3 states away. "I think I got it," I told her. Jules screamed into the phone. "I knew it. Ellie, you are overqualified for it. They would be idiots not to hire you. It feels real." "Jules," I said, staring at the brick facade of the logistics center, "it feels like I can finally stop looking over my shoulder." The next morning, I woke up at 6. I showered, dressed in casual clothes, and sat at my small kitchen table with my phone placed directly in the center of the placemat. I waited. By 10 in the morning, I had checked my email 15 times. By noon, I was pacing the length of my small living room, counting the floorboards, 42 boards from the window to the kitchen tile. At 2 in the afternoon, my phone pinged. It was an email. My heart hammered against my ribs. I picked it up, expecting an offer letter, a salary figure, a start date. "Dear Miss Morgan, thank you for your interest in the operations manager position at Ridgeview Logistics. While your qualifications were impressive, we have decided to move in a different direction following our reference verification process. We wish you the best of luck in your future endeavors. Sincerely, Ridgeview HR Team." I stared at the screen until the letters blurred. Reference verification? Marcus had practically hired me in the room. He had told me to keep my phone on. The shift was so abrupt, it felt like physical whiplash. I typed a reply immediately, my fingers trembling slightly. "Dear Marcus, I was surprised to receive this update given our positive conversation yesterday. Could you provide any feedback on what specifically changed during the verification process? I am eager to clear up any misunderstandings." I hit send. I waited 3 hours. No reply. I called the main line and asked for Marcus. The receptionist put me on hold for 5 minutes before coming back on the line. "I am sorry," she said, her voice sounding practiced and tight. "Marcus is in meetings for the rest of the week. He said to refer to the email." I hung up. I sat in the silence of my apartment, the silence that suddenly felt heavy and oppressive. It was just bad luck, I told myself. Someone else had applied internally. A nephew of the CEO had needed a job. It happened, but it kept happening. 2 weeks later, I was in the final rounds for a supervisor role at Northline Medical Billing. The interview went perfectly. The hiring manager, a stern woman named Patricia who rarely smiled, had told me I was the strongest candidate they had seen in months. We just need to clear the final background and reference checks. She had said, standard procedure. 2 days later, the email arrived. We have decided to rescind our tentative interest following the final background review. Rescind, that was a heavy word. Then came Hearth and Harbor Property Group. I was desperate by then. I applied for a property management role that paid 20% less than what I was worth. I charmed the regional manager. We bonded over a shared love of mid-century architecture. He shook my hand and gave me a start date, pending the formality of the check. The rejection came on a Tuesday. Due to information received during our final vetting process, we cannot proceed with your employment. I sat on my floor, surrounded by printed resumes and cover letters. 3 jobs, 3 glowing interviews, 3 abrupt, vague rejections that hit specifically after the reference stage. I was not paranoid. I was a logical person. I worked in operations. I understood cause and effect. If the machine stopped working at the same point in the process 3 times in a row, you did not kick the machine. You looked for the blockage. I picked up my phone and scrolled to the number of a recruiter named Sarah. I had met her early in my search. She had been kind, surprisingly human for a headhunter. She had placed me at Northline, or tried to. She had been the one to set up the interview with Patricia. I dialed. She answered on the second ring. Eliana, she said. Her voice was guarded. Hi, Sarah, I said, keeping my tone steady. Look, I am not calling to ask for the job back. I know that door is closed, but I need to know something. I am hitting a wall with every single application. Right at the finish line. Eliana, I really cannot discuss client feedback. She said, please. I interrupted. I am 33 years old. I have a clean record. I have never been fired. But 3 times in a month, I have lost offers after the reference check. I am scaring myself. Sarah, I need to know if there is a mistake on my record. Did I fail a drug test I did not take? Is my identity stolen? There was a long silence on the other end. I could hear her breathing, the click of a keyboard in the background. Sarah, please, I whispered. Listen to me, she said, her voice dropping to a hush. I am not supposed to tell you this. If you tell anyone I told you, I will deny it. I promise. I said, Patricia was ready to hire you. Sarah said, then she got a call. It was a reference check, but not one listed on your resume. It came in through the main line. They claimed to be a former employer. What did they say? I asked. My blood ran cold. They said you were let go for theft, Sarah said. The word hung in the air like a guillotine blade. Theft. That is a lie. I said, my voice shaking, I have never stolen a paperclip, let alone. They said there was a pattern. Sarah continued, rushing to get the words out. Cash drawer discrepancies, missing petty cash. They said you were smart about it, that you never got caught on camera, but that everyone knew. They said you were a liability. Who called? I demanded. Who was it? They did not give a name, Sarah said, or if they did. Patricia did not tell me. But Eliana, in this industry, the moment the word theft is whispered, you are radioactive. No one wants to risk it. I stared at the white wall of my living room. Theft. It was such a dirty, small word. It implied a lack of character, a sneakiness that went against everything I believed about myself. Thank you, Sarah, I said. I hung up before I could cry. I did not cry, though. I sat there and felt the shock turn into a cold, hard knot in my stomach. Theft. I stood up and went to my laptop. I pulled up the websites for the 3 major credit bureaus. I paid the expedited fees to download my full consumer background reports. I needed to see what the employers were seeing. I waited for the files to generate. My leg bouncing nervously under the table. When they opened, I scoured them. Criminal record? None. Civil judgments? None. Credit score? 740. Aliases? None. There was nothing. No red flags. No identity theft. No clerical errors where I had been confused with a criminal named Eliana Morgan. On paper, I was a ghost of a perfect citizen, which meant the poison was not in the system. It was in the air. Someone was calling these places. Someone knew exactly when I was interviewing. Someone knew exactly when the background checks were happening. I closed my eyes and let the image of my parents wash over me. Marianne and Clive Morgan. My mother, with her manicured hands, and her voice that could sound like sweet tea while she poured arsenic into your cup. My father, with his silent brooding and his ability to make you feel like you were taking up too much space just by breathing. I had cut contact 6 months ago. It had been a slow, painful severance. It started when I refused to sign a loan for one of my father's shell companies, a business venture he swore was a sure thing. Just like the last 5, when I said no, they had turned on me. They called me selfish. They called me ungrateful. They told me I would be nothing without them. You will come crawling back. My mother had screamed at me as I packed my car. You do not know how the real world works. Ellie, you need us. I had left. I had changed my address. I had blocked their numbers on my cell phone, though I kept the old SIM card in a drawer just in case. But how did they know where I was applying? I opened a new document on my laptop. I named it the proof folder. I started typing. Ridgeview Logistics. Interview date, October 12th. Rejection, October 14th. Northline Medical. Interview date, October 20th. Rejection, October 22nd. Hearth and Harbor. Interview date, November 1st. Rejection, November 4th. I looked at the dates. The pattern was undeniable. Then I made a second list. Who knew about these interviews? Me? The hiring managers? And I stopped. I had updated my LinkedIn profile. I had not blocked them on LinkedIn. I had posted about being excited for new opportunities in Marrow Glen. I had been careless. I had underestimated their obsession. I needed to be sure. I needed to hear it in her voice. I walked to my bedroom dresser and dug through the junk drawer until I found the old SIM card. I swapped it into my phone. The screen lit up with missed calls and texts from months ago. But I ignored them. I dialed the landline of the house I grew up in. It rang 4 times. Hello? My mother's voice was the same as always. Light, airy, deceptive. Hi, Mom, I said. There was a pause, a thick, heavy silence. Ellie? Oh my goodness. Ellie! Clive! Get in here! It is Ellie! Her voice shifted instantly into a performance of delight. It was terrifying how good she was at it. Hi, Mom, I said again, keeping my voice flat. We have been so worried, Marianne cried. You just vanished. We did not know if you were dead or alive. Where are you? Are you safe? I am fine. I said, I am in Pennsylvania. Pennsylvania? Whatever for? You know, your father was just saying yesterday how much we miss having you around for Sunday dinner. The house is so quiet. I gripped the phone tighter. I am looking for work. Mom, oh? Marianne's tone shifted slightly. It became sharper, more alert. Work? I thought you had that nice job in the city. I left that job when I left the city. I said, I am interviewing, or I was, but I keep running into trouble. Trouble? She asked. The innocence in her voice was almost perfect, but not quite. There was a tiny vibration of satisfaction in it. Yes, I said. I get the offers, and then they vanish. Someone keeps telling employers I am a thief. There was a beat of silence, not the silence of confusion, but the silence of someone calibrating their next move. A thief? Marianne said. Well, that is terrible. Ellie, why would anyone say that? I do not know. I said, I was hoping you might. Me? She laughed. A tinkling, icy sound. Why would I know anything about your messy life? Darling, we have not spoken in months. It just seems strange. I said, that the exact thing you threatened me with, that I would fail without you, is happening. Marianne sighed. It was a long, dramatic exhale. Ellie, you always had such a vivid imagination. Maybe it is not a conspiracy. Maybe people just see what we saw. What is that supposed to mean? I asked. She dropped the sweetness. Her voice became low and hard, the voice she used when the curtains were drawn and no neighbors were watching. It means that character leaves a stain. Eliana, you walked out on your family. You abandoned us when we needed your signature. That shows a lack of integrity. Maybe these employers are just sensing that. Some people just do not trust you. Ellie, the line went dead. She had hung up. I sat there, staring at the phone. My hand was shaking. Some people just don't trust you. It wasn't a denial. It was a confirmation. She didn't even try to pretend she was outraged on my behalf. She just pivoted straight to telling me I deserved it. I needed air. I needed to get out of the apartment. I grabbed my coat and walked down the 3 flights of stairs to the street. Marrow Glen was a quiet town, built around an old steel mill that had been converted into lofts and tech spaces. I walked to the community center 2 blocks away. I had volunteered there last week, helping to organize a coat drive. It was a small thing, just a way to fill the empty hours and meet people who weren't interviewing me. I walked into the lobby. The director, a kind woman named Brenda, was behind the front desk. She looked up and saw me. Usually. Brenda waved. Usually. She smiled and asked how the job hunt was going. Today. She looked down at her papers. She adjusted her glasses and did not make eye contact. Hi, Brenda, I said, walking up to the desk. I just wanted to check if you needed help with the sorting tomorrow. Brenda cleared her throat. She looked uncomfortable, shifting her weight from one foot to the other. Actually, Eliana, she said, her voice stiff. We are all set for volunteers right now. We have had a surge of interest. Oh, I said. I felt a prickle of unease on the back of my neck. That is great, but I'm happy to come in anyway. I know the system you... No, Brenda said. She looked up, and her eyes were hard. We are set. Thank you. She turned her back to me and started typing on her computer. It was a dismissal, a brutal, public dismissal. I walked out, my face burning. What had happened? I had been there 2 days ago, and they were begging for help. I got back to my apartment and opened my laptop again. I logged into the email account I had used for the volunteer application. It was an older account, one I rarely checked. I scrolled through the inbox. Nothing from Brenda. I checked the spam folder. There was an email there, forwarded to me by an automated system because my name was mentioned in the body. It was a feature I had set up years ago and forgotten about. A Google alert for my own name. The subject line read, Concern regarding volunteer staff. Eliana Morgan. I clicked it. It was an email sent to the general inbox of the Marrow Glen Community Board. To the Board of Directors. I am writing to you as a concerned community member regarding Ms. Eliana Morgan, who I understand is currently volunteering with your donations department. While I hesitate to interfere, I feel a moral obligation to share that Miss Morgan left our community under a cloud of suspicion regarding the mismanagement of charitable donations. It was never taken to court. We preferred to handle it privately to spare her the embarrassment, but given her access to vulnerable resources. I thought you should be aware. She can be very charming, but there is a history of entitlement and misappropriation that often goes unnoticed until it is too late. Sincerely, Clive Morgan. I stared at the screen. My father who barely knew how to attach a PDF to an email, had written this. No, he hadn't written it. The syntax was too smooth. The faux reluctance too polished. Marianne had written it. Clive had just sent it. They weren't just stopping me from getting a job. They were salting the earth. They were reaching out to a tiny community center in a town they had probably never heard of until they stalked me online, just to make sure I couldn't even give away old coats without being looked at like a criminal. I felt a wave of nausea. This wasn't just spite. This was a tactical strike. They were cutting off my income, my reputation, and my connection to the community. They were building a wall around me, brick by brick, until the only door left open was the one leading back to their house. I looked at the timestamp on the email. It was sent at 6 a.m. this morning. I printed the email. I punched 3 holes in the paper. I opened my proof folder, which was currently just a physical binder I had bought an hour ago. I snapped the paper inside. My hands were steady now. The shaking had stopped. They thought I would break. They thought I would read this, feel the shame they wanted me to feel, and pick up the phone to beg for forgiveness. They thought Eliana, the daughter who always tried to keep the peace, would crumble, but they had forgotten something. I was an operations manager. I fixed broken systems. I identified bottlenecks. I managed crises. And I had a grandmother. I looked at the framed photo on my desk. Lorraine Hale, my mother's mother, the woman who had taught me how to balance a checkbook when I was 10 and how to spot a liar when I was 12. She was in a senior living facility 5 miles away. The only reason I had chosen Marrow Glen as my sanctuary, I hadn't told her everything yet. I didn't want to worry her. But looking at Clive's email, at the calculated cruelty of it, I realized I was past the point of protecting anyone. I needed to see Lorraine. I closed the binder. The sun was setting outside, casting long shadows across my empty apartment. I wasn't Eliana the victim anymore. I was Eliana the witness. And I was going to document every single thing they did until I had enough paper to bury them. Part 1 concluded. I checked my phone one last time. Another rejection email had come in. This one from a temp agency I had applied to as a backup. Not moving forward at this time. I didn't delete it. I printed it. Into the binder it went. I grabbed my keys. It was time to go to Maple Hollow Senior Living. It was time to tell Grandma that they had started the war. I walked out the door, locking it behind me with a solid, metallic click. The game had changed. I just didn't know the rules yet, but I had a feeling Lorraine did. One thing was certain. I was not going back, not ever. If they wanted a fight, they were going to get one. They had called me a thief. Fine. I would steal their narrative and tear it to shreds. I got into my car and turned the key. The engine sputtered, then caught. I drove into the gathering dark, the streetlights of Marrow Glen flickering on one by one, lighting the way to the only ally I had left. The email from my father burned in my mind. Mismanagement of charitable donations. It was such a specific, ugly lie. It was designed to hurt. I would make them eat those words. I just needed to survive long enough to serve the meal. I pulled out of the parking lot, my tires crunching on the gravel. The road ahead was dark, but for the first time in weeks, my mind was clear. I was not crazy. I was being hunted, and the hunter was about to become the prey. I drove toward Maple Hollow, the binder resting on the passenger seat like a weapon. The waiting room of the legal aid clinic smelled like wet wool and stale coffee. I sat on a hard plastic chair. My binder, the one I had labeled the proof folder, clutched against my chest like a shield. I had been waiting for 45 minutes. The clock on the wall ticked with a loud, mechanical rhythm that seemed to mock the racing of my heart. When my name was finally called, I was ushered into a small, windowless office piled high with files. The attorney, a man named Mr. Henderson, who looked as tired as I felt, gestured for me to sit. "I have 15 minutes, he said, not unkindly. "Tell me what is happening." I opened the binder. I laid out the timeline, the interviews, the verbal offers, the sudden shifts in tone, the emails from my father, the rejection from the volunteer board. Mr. Henderson listened, rubbing his temples. When I finished, he sighed. "It sounds like a nightmare." "Miss Morgan," he said. "But legally?" "It is thin." "Thin?" I asked, my voice rising. "My father sent an email accusing me of mismanaging funds, and that is the only piece of hard evidence you have." He said. He tapped the printout of Clive's email. "This? He can argue it was a private expression of concern to a non-profit. It is defamatory." "Yes, but what are your damages? You were a volunteer. You lost no income from that specific email, but the jobs." I insisted. "They are calling my potential employers." He leaned forward. "Can you prove it? Do you have a recording of the call? Do you have a sworn affidavit from a hiring manager stating—" Clive Morgan called me and said Eliana is a thief? No, I admitted. They just say, reference check, or integrity concerns. Then you have smoke. But no fire. Mr. Henderson said, defamation suits are expensive and difficult. Without proof of exactly who said what, a judge will toss it out as hearsay. Patterns matter. Certainly, if you can get just one employer to go on record, written record, that a family member contacted them with specific lies, we might have a case for tortious interference. But until then, you are fighting ghosts. I walked out of the clinic feeling heavier than when I went in. Ghosts. That was exactly what they were. My parents were haunting my life, invisible and destructive, and the law could not exorcise them without a body. I needed a body. I went back to my apartment and turned it into a war room. I sat at my desk and drafted a script. It had to be perfect. I could not sound desperate. I had to sound professional, confused, and purely administrative. I picked up the phone and dialed the number for the HR department at Northline Medical Billing. Hello, this is Eliana Morgan. I said when the representative answered, I am calling regarding my recent application. I understand the decision has been made, and I respect that. However, I am in the process of auditing my own professional references to ensure their accuracy for future applications. Could you confirm for me if the negative feedback received during my background check came from a listed professional reference or an external source? The woman on the other line hesitated. I could hear her typing. Ms. Morgan, we do not typically disclose details of the vetting process. She said, I understand. I said, keeping my voice steady, I am simply trying to correct any clerical errors on my end. If a listed reference gave negative feedback, I need to know so I can remove them. If it was an external source, I would appreciate knowing so I can address a potential identity error. There was a long pause. Hold on a moment, she said. She put me on hold. The elevator music played for 3 minutes. When she came back, her voice was softer, less guarded. Ms. Morgan? I cannot give you a name, but I see a note here in the file. It says a call was received on October 22nd regarding character concerns. Was it a professional reference, I asked? No, she said. The note says, it says, unsolicited call from family member. The caller warned of a theft risk. That is all I can tell you. My hand gripped the phone so hard my knuckles turned white. Thank you, I whispered. You have been very helpful. I hung up and typed it into my spreadsheet. Northline Medical, confirmed. Family member call. Accusation, theft risk. It was the first crack in the wall. A stranger had admitted it, but Mr. Henderson was right. She hadn't given me a name, and she hadn't put it in writing. It was still hearsay. But how did they know I applied to Northline, or Ridgeview, or Hearth and Harbor? I looked at my laptop. I had been so careful. I hadn't posted on social media since the LinkedIn slip-up, but they were still finding me. I opened my email settings. I felt a cold prickle of dread as I navigated to the security tab. I had had this Gmail account since college. 10 years of digital debris. I clicked on recovery email. There it was, marianne.morgan@ymail.com. I stared at it, feeling sick. I had set that up a decade ago, back when I trusted her, back when she was just my mom, not my adversary. If she had access to her old email, and if I had ever triggered a password reset or a security alert, a notification might have gone to her, or worse. I checked the recent activity log. Log in. October 12th. Location, Des Moines, Iowa. Log in. October 20th. Location, Des Moines, Iowa. My parents lived in Des Moines. I was in Pennsylvania. They weren't just guessing. They were reading my mail. They were logging into my account. Probably reading my sent folder to see where I applied. Then looking up the numbers for those companies. It was a violation so deep, so intimate, that I felt physically dirty. They had been watching me rebuild my life, laughing as they kicked the blocks down one by one. I didn't panic. Panic was what they wanted. Panic made you sloppy. I went into overdrive. First, I took screenshots of the login activity. I printed them, Into the binder, then, the purge began. I created a brand new email address with a random string of letters and numbers that meant nothing to anyone. I changed the passwords to my bank accounts, my utility bills, my student loans. I enabled two-factor authentication on everything, linking it to a burner phone app, not my main number. I called the credit bureaus. I would like to freeze my credit. I told the automated system, no new inquiries, no new accounts. I went through my contact list on my phone. Who else did they know? Who might they call to ask about me? I deleted numbers. I blocked mutual acquaintances. I shrank my world down until it was just me, the four walls of my apartment, and the hum of my refrigerator. I felt safer. But I also felt profoundly alone. The realization that my mother had been reading my cover letters, reading my hopes and dreams, then picking up the phone to destroy them, broke something inside me. It wasn't just control, it was malice. I needed to see someone who actually loved me. I drove to Maple Hollow Senior Living the next afternoon. The facility was nice, clean, smelling of lemon polish and carpet cleaner. Lorraine had insisted on moving here 2 years ago, claiming she didn't want to be a burden. But I knew now it was because she couldn't stand to be in the same city as her daughter anymore. I found her in the solarium, working on a crossword puzzle. She was 82, with silver hair cut in a sharp bob and eyes that missed absolutely nothing. "Eliana," she said, putting down her pen, "you look like you have been fighting a war." I sat down opposite her. The wicker chair creaked. "I am, Grandma," I said. "They are doing it. They are sabotaging my job search." Lorraine didn't gasp. She didn't look shocked. She just nodded slowly, her lips pressing into a thin line. I told her everything, the calls to employers, the theft accusations, the email login I found yesterday. When I finished, she reached across the table and took my hand. Her skin was paper thin, but her grip was iron. "I knew they would," she said softly. "You knew?" I asked. Lorraine sighed. She looked out the window at the gray Pennsylvania sky. "Your mother. She has never known how to love something without owning it. And your father is a weak man who mistakes cruelty for strength. When you stopped taking their money 6 months ago," I told myself, "watch the clock." She reached into her cardigan pocket and pulled out a tissue, dabbing at the corner of her eye, but not from sadness, from anger. "Eliana," she said, her voice sharpening, "I have been keeping a file." "A file?" She nodded. "Years ago, when you were in college, and they threatened to cut off your tuition because you wanted to study operations instead of nursing. I started writing things down, dates, conversations, the way they would twist the truth to make you look incompetent so they could swoop in and save you. They call it rescuing, but it is drowning." She leaned in closer. "I knew that once you really left, really cut the cord, they would try to make you unemployable. If you cannot earn money, you have to go home. It is the oldest trick in the book of control." I felt tears prick my eyes. It was one thing to suspect it. It was another to hear it confirmed by the matriarch of the family. "What do I do?" "Grandma?" I asked. "I am running out of savings. I have maybe 2 months of rent left." Lorraine sat up straighter. She looked around the room to ensure no nurses were listening. "I prepared for this," she said. She reached into her purse, a large, sturdy leather bag she took everywhere, and pulled out a small velvet pouch. She slid it across the table to me. Inside was a single silver key. It looked old. "Commonwood Federal Credit Union," she said. "Box number 402. "What is in it?" I asked. "Leverage," she said. She tapped her hand on the table. "But Eliana, you cannot open it yet." "Why not?" I asked. "I need help now." "Because," Lorraine said firmly, "if you use it now, it is just a family squabble. It is," he said, she said. "We need them to commit to the lie on paper. We need them to cross a line that they cannot walk back from. They have crossed lines." "Grandma, they hacked my email." Lorraine shook her head. "Private snooping is ugly, but it is not public enough. We need an official act of destruction, something that proves damages." She looked at me with intense seriousness. "Wait for the next blow. It will come. They are escalating. When they cost you something you actually hold in your hands, not just a possibility, but a reality, then you open the box. I pocketed the key. I trusted her. Lorraine had been the only person in my childhood who ever told me I was smart, capable, and good. If she said, wait, I would wait. I did not have to wait long. 3 days later, the mail arrived. In the stack of circulars and bills was a thick envelope from Ridgeview Logistics. My heart jumped. Maybe it was a mistake? Maybe Marcus had fought for me? I tore it open. It wasn't an offer. It was a formal letter on thick, bonded letterhead. Dear Ms. Morgan, this letter serves as formal notice regarding your candidacy for the operations manager position, while we initially extended a verbal intent to hire. Subsequent information has come to our attention regarding significant integrity concerns and discrepancies in your employment history. Specifically, we have received credible reports regarding financial irregularities in your previous roles. Ridgeview Logistics maintains a zero-tolerance policy for theft or financial mismanagement. As such, we are formally rescinding any and all interest in your candidacy. We request that you do not contact our offices again. Sincerely, the Ridgeview Executive Team. I sat on my couch, the paper trembling in my hands. This wasn't a polite, moving in a different direction email. This was a permanent blacklisting. They had used the words theft and financial irregularities. They had put it in writing. They had formalized the lie. Credible reports. My parents had not just whispered this time. They must have provided something. Fake documents. A falsified reference letter. Something that looked real enough to scare a major logistics firm into sending a cease-and-desist-style rejection. I felt the anger rise up in me, hot and clarifying. It burned away the sadness. It burned away the fear. They had crossed the line. I grabbed my car keys. I grabbed the silver key Lorraine had given me. I drove to Maple Hollow first. I found Lorraine in her room, reading a book. I didn't say a word. I just held up the letter. She took it. She put on her reading glasses. She read it twice. Okay, she said. Her voice was calm, but her eyes were flinty. Okay, that is it. She stood up. Take me to the bank. Eliana. We drove to Commonwood Federal Credit Union in silence. It was an old bank, one with marble floors and the smell of old money and dust. We signed in. Lorraine's signature was shaky but legible. The clerk led us into the vault. It was cool inside, the walls lined with hundreds of steel drawers. The clerk took Lorraine's key and his own master key. He turned them in sync. Click. He slid the long metal box out and carried it to a private viewing room. He closed the door, leaving us alone. Lorraine sat in the chair. Open it, she said. I lifted the lid. Inside, there was no money. There were no jewels. There were papers, stacks of them, neatly organized in plastic sleeves. On top was a thick manila envelope labeled Timeline of Retaliatory Behavior. It was notarized. The date on the stamp was 3 years ago. I flipped through it. It was a log, a detailed, meticulous log of every time my parents had used money to manipulate me, every time they had threatened me. June 12, 2019. Marianne threatened to call Eliana's landlord to cancel her lease if Eliana did not attend Clive's birthday dinner. I intervened with a check to the landlord to secure the apartment. December 4, 2020. Clive told Eliana he would ruin her credit score if she moved to Chicago. I confirmed with my attorney that his threat was legally actionable harassment. I looked at Lorraine. You wrote all this? I knew you would need a history, she said. Abuse is never an event. Eliana, it is a system. I documented the system. Under the log was a business card. It was thick, cream-colored cardstock. Bramwell Sloan, LLP, Sienna Park. Attorney at law. Who is this? I asked. My attorney. Lorraine said, she has been holding a retainer for you for 5 years. The instructions on the file are simple. Activate only if Marianne and Clive interfere with Eliana's employment. I stared at the card. 5 years. Lorraine had been paying a lawyer for 5 years, waiting for this moment. Dig deeper, Lorraine said. I reached into the bottom of the box. There was a sealed envelope with my name on it in Lorraine's handwriting. The ink was slightly faded. Read it, she said. I broke the seal. My dearest Eliana, if you are reading this, it means they have done what I feared most. They have tried to take your name. You must understand something fundamental about your parents. They are not protecting their money from you. They are protecting their narrative. They need you to be the disaster so they can be the saints. Once you become competent, you become a threat. They will call you unstable. They will call you ungrateful. And eventually, they will call you untrustworthy. Do not believe them. Do not internalize their poison. You are the most honest person I know. The only thing you ever stole was your own freedom, and that was yours to take. Use what is in this box. Burn the house down if you have to. I will hand you the matches. Love. Grandma. I wiped a tear from my cheek. I hadn't realized how much I needed permission to fight back. There is one more thing, Lorraine said. I looked in the box. Tucked into the very back corner was a small silver USB drive. It was taped to an index card. On the card, written in Sharpie, were the words, "For Eliana, if they call you a thief." I picked it up. It felt light in my hand, but I knew it carried the weight of a bomb. What is on this? I asked. Lorraine looked at me. Her expression was grim, a mixture of sorrow and resolve. The truth, she said, the real story about the missing money from 10 years ago. The one they blamed on you. The one I solved, but never told you about because I wanted to keep the peace. She reached out and closed the lid of the empty metal box. I am done keeping the peace. Eliana, play the recording. I looked at the drive, then at the Ridgeview rejection letter on the table, the integrity concerns, the financial irregularities. They had built a lie to cage me. Lorraine had built a key to let me out. I put the drive in my pocket. Let's go see this lawyer, I said. Lorraine smiled. A small, fierce thing. Drive fast, she said. The offices of Bramwell and Sloan were located in a glass-paneled building that overlooked the river, a stark contrast to the cramped legal aid clinic I had visited just days before. The air inside smelled of expensive leather and air conditioning kept at a precise, chilly temperature. I sat in a conference room that felt more like a boardroom, my hands resting on the polished mahogany table. Sienna Park walked in. She was younger than I expected, perhaps in her late 30s, with a sharp, angular bob and a suit that looked tailored to within an inch of its life. She didn't smile, but her eyes were alert, scanning me with an intensity that made me sit up straighter. Ms. Morgan, she said, extending a hand. I am Sienna. Your grandmother speaks very highly of you. I shook her hand. Her grip was firm. She speaks highly of you, too. Apparently, you have been on retainer for 5 years. Sienna sat down and opened a thick file. Lorraine is a woman of foresight, Sienna said. She came to me shortly after your grandfather passed. She was concerned about the dynamics in your family. She wanted to ensure that if things ever escalated to the point of financial or professional sabotage, there was a structure in place to protect you. She slid a document across the table. This is the contingency packet, she said. It contains sworn statements, a list of potential witnesses, and a legal strategy that we have kept dormant until you gave the word. Lorraine called me this morning. She said the word is go. I looked at the papers. They were drafted with terrifying precision. Strategy for defense against tortious interference with economic expectancy. Defamation per se. It is not just a defense, Sienna continued. It is a trap. Lorraine knew that your parents operate on plausible deniability. They imply things. They whisper. They use the phone instead of email. To win this, we need to force them onto the record. But first, we need to understand the narrative they are using. She pointed to the silver USB drive I had placed on the table. Lorraine told me you haven't listened to this yet. Sienna said, I think you should. It provides the context for the thief accusation. I nodded. My throat felt tight. I wasn't sure I wanted to hear it, but I needed to know the origin story of the lie that was ruining my life. Sienna plugged the drive into her laptop and clicked a file. The room went silent, save for the hum of the hard drive. Then, Lorraine's voice filled the air. It sounded younger, stronger, but the cadence was unmistakably hers. Statement of Lorraine Hale. Date: December 24th, 2014. I closed my eyes. That was nearly 10 years ago. I had been 23. I am recording this account to ensure there is a record of the incident involving the missing Christmas funds. Lorraine's voice said, on the evening of December 23rd, my son-in-law, Clive Morgan, claimed that an envelope containing $2,000 in cash, intended for the catering staff bonus, had gone missing from the study. He immediately accused his daughter, Eliana, who was home from university. I remembered that night. I remembered the screaming. I remembered my father looming over me, asking where the money was, telling me that my silence was an admission of guilt. I remembered crying in my room, feeling insane because I knew I hadn't touched it. Clive claimed he saw Eliana near the desk. Lorraine continued. Her voice was calm, almost clinical. He told Marianne that Eliana had been asking for money for a spring break trip and had been refused, implying a motive. Marianne accepted this narrative immediately. They threatened to call the police if Eliana did not confess. Eliana refused to confess. I gripped the edge of the table. They had threatened to call the police. I had forgotten that part. I had blocked it out. Later that night, while the family was asleep, the recording went on. I went into the study. I did not believe Eliana had taken it. I know my granddaughter. I also know my son-in-law. I searched the desk. I found the envelope taped to the underside of the bottom drawer. It was not just misplaced. It was hidden. My eyes snapped open. I removed the envelope. Lorraine said, I counted the money. All $2,000 were there. I confronted Clive the next morning. He claimed he must have put it there for safekeeping and forgotten. He asked me not to tell Marianne, saying it would only upset her to know he had been so careless. But it was not carelessness. I saw his face. He was disappointed that the crisis was over. He wanted the crisis. He wanted Eliana to be the villain, so he could be the victim of a wayward daughter. The recording clicked off. Silence stretched in the conference room. I felt a wave of nausea roll through me, followed by a flush of pure, white-hot rage. He hid it, I whispered. He hid the money to frame me. Sienna nodded. And he did it to create a precedent. See, if you are a thief at 23, then when you assert your independence at 33, they can pull that old card out of their sleeve. Oh, Eliana has always had sticky fingers. Remember that Christmas? It grounds the lie in history. I felt grief wash over me. I had spent years wondering if I was inherently ungrateful, if I was difficult, if I was somehow the problem. And the whole time, it was a script written by a man who taped cash to the bottom of a drawer just to break his daughter's spirit. They have been telling people I am a thief for a decade. I said, my voice shaking. Sienna closed the laptop. That is why we are going to stop them. But we have to be smart. We have 2 tracks here. Eliana, she held up 2 fingers. Track 1 is evidence gathering. You have the Ridgeview letter, which is gold, but we need more. We need to know who else they have poisoned. I want you to reach out to your network, quietly. See if you can find anyone who heard these rumors before the job search started. We need to prove this is a long-standing campaign of defamation, not just a reaction to your recent estrangement. And track 2? I asked. Track 2 is the warning shot. She said, I am drafting a preservation and cease and desist letter. It is a formal legal document demanding they preserve all communications regarding you, emails, texts, call logs, and demanding they cease all contact with your potential employers. Will that stop them? I asked. Sienna's expression was grim. No, narcissists rarely stop because of a letter. They usually escalate. They view boundaries as challenges. But the letter serves a purpose. Once they receive it, any further action they take proves actual malice. It shows they knew they were hurting you and did it anyway. That is what wins defamation cases. Send it. I said. I spent the next 2 days playing detective in my own life. It was a masochistic exercise. I had to call people I hadn't spoken to in years and ask them if my parents had ever trashed me to them. I started with Nadine Wexler. She was an old friend of the family, a woman who used to host Tupperware parties with my mother. She had always been kind to me, slipping me candy when my mother wasn't looking. I called her on a Tuesday morning. "Nadine, it is Eliana Morgan." "Eliana," she cried. Her voice was warm, but there was a hesitation in it, a slight delay. "I haven't seen you since the blowout." The blowout. That's what they were calling my departure. "I know. Nadine, I am sorry to call out of the blue. I am actually going through a bit of a background check issue with a new job, and I am trying to trace where some bad information might be coming from." There was silence on the line. "Eliana, honey," Nadine said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "Is it about the money?" My stomach dropped. "What money?" "Nadine?" "Well, Nadine stammered. "Your mother, she confided in us a few years back. At the book club, she was so torn up about it. She said she had to lend you money to pay off a creditor because you had borrowed some funds from a previous employer. She said she was terrified you would go to jail." I closed my eyes, pressing the phone to my ear. Marianne had told the book club. She had planted the seed in a room full of community gossips. "Nadine," I said, keeping my voice steady, "that never happened. I have never borrowed money from an employer. I have never been in debt to a creditor like that." "Oh," Nadine said. She sounded unconvinced. Well, she was crying. "Eliana." She seemed so heartbroken. She said, "We just can't trust Ellie with money. But we love her anyway." That was the hook. "We love her anyway." The martyr act. "Thank you." "Nadine," I said, "that helps clarify things." I hung up and added it to the timeline. Witness: Nadine Wexler. Date: approximately 3 years ago. Allegation: theft from employer, paid off by parents. It was a lie wrapped in a lie. Next, I called my cousin Tara. Tara and I used to be close, but she had drifted away when she got married and had kids. She was still in the family orbit, though. Tara picked up on the first ring. "What do you want?" "Eliana?" she asked. Her tone was defensive. "Hi. Tara, I am just asking a question. Has Mom said anything about me lately?" Tara snorted. "Has she said anything?" "Eliana, you are the monologue at every Sunday dinner." Poor Eliana. So lost, so unstable. "Does she talk about my job?" I asked. "She talks about how she is managing you." Tara said, "Managing me?" "Yeah. Last Thanksgiving. I think you were already gone. She was having wine with Aunt Carol. She was bragging. She said, 'I made sure Ellie never gets too comfortable. If she gets comfortable, she forgets who holds the purse strings.'" "She said that?" I asked. "Explicitly?" Tara sighed. "Look, Eliana, I stayed out of it. But yeah, she said she had put a word in with some people to make sure you didn't get big-headed. I thought she meant she talked you down from a bad investment or something. I didn't know she was torching your life. She is, Tara, she is torching it to the ground." "Well," Tara said, her voice softening just a fraction, "you shouldn't have refused to sign that loan for Uncle Clive. You know how they get about money. It's their religion." I hung up. I had the confirmation. Nadine confirmed the lie. Tara confirmed the motive. Control? Never get too comfortable. I sent the notes to Sienna. The cease and desist letter arrived at my parents' house in Des Moines on a Thursday. I knew because I got a notification from the courier service that it had been signed for by C. Morgan. I waited for the explosion. I expected a screaming phone call. I expected a barrage of texts. Instead, my phone stayed silent. But 2 hours later, I received a call from a number I didn't recognize. The area code was local to Marrow Glen. "Ms. Morgan? This is Linda, the administrator at Maple Hollow Senior Living." My heart hammered. "Is my grandmother okay?" "Physically, she is fine," Linda said. Her voice was professional but strained. "However, we have a situation. We received a call from your mother, Marianne Morgan, who is the primary power of attorney on your grandmother's medical directive. My blood ran cold. What did she say? She informed us that you have been harassing Lorraine. Linda said, she claims you are emotionally unstable and that you have been demanding money from your grandmother. She stated that your visits are causing Lorraine significant distress and endangering her health. That is a lie, I said, my voice rising. Ask Lorraine. She will tell you. We did ask Lorraine, Linda said, and she denied it vigorously. However, given the severity of the allegations and the threat of legal action from your mother regarding our duty of care, we have to follow protocol. We are placing a temporary restriction on your visitation rights pending a full social work review. You are banning me? I asked. Disbelief flooding my veins. My mother lives 1,000 miles away. I am the only one who visits her. I am sorry. Ms. Morgan, we have to protect the facility and the resident. You cannot come onto the property until this is resolved. I hung up, shaking. They hadn't attacked me directly. They had attacked the one thing I had left. They knew Lorraine was my support system. They knew she was my witness, so they cut the line. It was a military tactic. Sever the supply chain. Isolate the target. I felt a scream building in my chest. I wanted to throw the phone through the window. I wanted to drive to Des Moines and burn their house down. But then my phone buzzed again. It was a FaceTime request. From Lorraine. I answered it immediately. Lorraine's face filled the screen. She looked furious. Her cheeks were pink, and her eyes were snapping fire. She was holding the iPad with a steady hand. Grandma, I said, choking back a sob. They banned me. They tried. Lorraine said. Her voice was steel. I am currently sitting in Linda's office. Linda, say hello. The camera panned to Linda, the administrator, who looked terrified. Hello. Eliana, Linda said weakly. I told Linda that if she enforces this ban based on the word of a woman who hasn't visited in 2 years, I will call the state licensing board and report this facility for elder abuse and false imprisonment. Lorraine said. I also told her that I'm revoking Marianne's power of attorney effective immediately. I have my lawyer faxing the paperwork over now. I let out a breath I didn't know I was holding. You did? I should have done it years ago, Lorraine said. She turned the camera back to herself. Eliana, listen to me. I am listening. This is what they do, she said. They do not fight fair. They go for the soft spots. They want you to panic. They want you to feel helpless so you give up. They count on you being tired. Are you tired? Eliana? I am exhausted. Grandma? I admitted. I am so tired I can't see straight. Good, Lorraine said. That means you are fighting hard enough. But you cannot stop. If you stop now, they win. And if they win, you will never be free. Do you hear me? I hear you. You can visit tomorrow, Lorraine said. Linda has agreed that the restriction was premature. Isn't that right? Linda? Correct. Linda's voice drifted in. I love you, Grandma. I said, I love you too, dear. Now go call that shark of a lawyer and tell her they escalated. I drove to Sienna's office the next morning. I felt brittle. The adrenaline was the only thing keeping me upright. My bank account balance was 3 digits. My rent was due in 10 days. My reputation was in tatters. And now, my parents were trying to isolate my grandmother. I sat in Sienna's office and told her everything. Sienna listened, tapping her pen against the desk. They are reacting. She said, that is actually good. It means the cease and desist scared them. They are lashing out to regain control. It doesn't feel good. I said, it feels like I'm losing. I can't get a job. Sienna, I have sent out 50 applications. The moment they check references, I am dead in the water. Sienna stopped tapping the pen. Then we need to catch them in the act, she said. We need indisputable proof. The Ridgeview letter is strong, but they can claim they never spoke to Ridgeview. That Ridgeview got that info from a third party. We need a smoking gun. We need to record them saying the words. How? I asked. I can't wiretap them. No, Sienna said. But we can set a trap. She leaned forward. I have a contact at a company called Alder Creek Systems. It's a mid-sized tech firm. The HR director owes me a favor. We are going to have you apply there. What good will that do? I asked. They will just call and trash me again. Exactly, Sienna said. But this time, Alder Creek will be expecting the call. They will log it. They will trace the number. And if your parents are foolish enough to leave a voicemail or send an email, we will have it captured in a forensic chain of custody, a reference trap. I said, a reference trap. Sienna confirmed. But you have to nail the interview. You have to be so good that when the bad reference comes in, it stands out like a sore thumb. Can you do that? I thought about the interviews I had lost. I thought about Marcus at Ridgeview, how his face had lit up when I talked about logistics. I was good at my job. I was damn good at it. My parents had made me feel small for so long I had almost forgotten that I was competent. I can do it, I said. Good, Sienna said, because this is the pivot point. Eliana, up until now, you have been defending. Now, we are attacking. We are going to give them exactly what they want. Another opportunity to ruin you. And when they take the bait, the jaws are going to snap shut. I walked out of her office into the bright sunlight of the city. I checked my bank account on my phone again. $412. It wasn't enough for rent. It wasn't enough for a lawyer. Though Sienna was working on the retainer Lorraine had set up, it was barely enough for food. But it was enough to buy a new blazer for an interview. I went to a discount store. I bought a charcoal gray jacket. I stood in the dressing room mirror. I looked tired. There were dark circles under my eyes. My hair was a little messy, but my eyes were different. They weren't the eyes of the girl who cried when her father accused her of stealing Christmas money. They were the eyes of a woman who knew where the bodies were buried. I bought the blazer. I went home and opened the application for Alder Creek Systems. I polished my resume until it shined. I wrote a cover letter that was sharp, confident, and undeniable. I hit send. Come and get me. I thought, looking at the screen, come and tell them I'm a thief. I'm daring you. I was tired. Lorraine was right about that. My bones ached with fatigue, but underneath the exhaustion, there was something else, a cold, hard resolve. I wasn't just fighting for a job anymore. I was fighting for the truth. And I had the one thing my parents never accounted for. I had the receipts. The interview at Alder Creek Systems felt like walking onto a stage where everyone knew the script except the audience. The office was modern, all glass walls and exposed brick. Located in a renovated warehouse on the edge of the River District, I sat across from David, the HR director, who Sienna had briefed. He was a man with a poker face that I imagined served him well in salary negotiations. But today, his eyes held a flicker of conspiratorial sympathy. We went through the motions. I talked about my experience with logistics software. I walked him through a time I had reduced shipping inefficiencies by 15%. I was sharp, professional, and articulate. I had to be. If I was anything less than stellar, the trap would not work. The defamation only mattered if the candidate was viable, if I was mediocre. They could just say I wasn't a good fit. I had to be the candidate they wanted to hire, so that when the poison arrived, the contrast was blinding. Thank you, Eliana, David said, closing my file. This was excellent, truly. Under normal circumstances, I would be drafting an offer letter this afternoon. I nodded, my hands clasped tightly in my lap to hide a slight tremor. And now? I asked. Now, David said, leaning back. We wait. I will flag your file as a finalist in our system. I will trigger the automated reference check notification. If anyone is monitoring your status, they will see movement. We shook hands. I walked out of the building. The autumn wind whipping my hair across my face. It felt perverse to hope for sabotage. But I needed them to strike. I needed them to walk into the cage we had built. I did not have to wait long. 3 days later, I was sitting in Sienna's office when David called her on speakerphone. We got one, David said. His voice was crisp, devoid of the polite warmth from the interview. Tell us everything, Sienna said. She had a notepad ready, her pen poised like a dart. It came in at 10 in the morning, David reported. A call to the main switchboard, asked to be transferred to HR regarding a pending hire. The receptionist put it through to my direct line because of the flag on the file. Who was it? I asked, Female voice. David said, older, cultured, but breathless. She sounded distressed. She wouldn't give her name. She said she was calling as a concerned family member. She said she didn't want to see a good company get hurt. I closed my eyes. I could hear my mother's voice perfectly. The concern, the hesitation, the performance. What exactly did she say? Sienna asked. She said, I love Eliana, but she has a sickness. She steals from workplaces. It starts small, but it always escalates. She used the phrase, compulsive theft. Then she said she couldn't live with herself if she didn't warn us. Did you ask for details? Sienna asked. I did. David replied. I asked for specific incidents. She demurred. She said she had to go, that she was shaking just making the call. But, and this is the key part, she left a number. She said, if you need to verify her history with the local police, call me back on this line and I can guide you to the right precinct. She left a number? I asked. That seemed sloppy. Marianne was usually more careful. She did. David said, I wrote it down. Sienna took the number. She thanked David and hung up. Then she turned to her computer. She thinks she is safe because it is likely a burner, Sienna said, her fingers flying across the keyboard. But let's see just how safe she is. Sienna had a private investigator on retainer, a guy named Miller who worked faster than anyone I had ever met. She emailed him the number. 20 minutes later, Miller called back. It is a prepaid line, Miller said. Bought at a pharmacy in Des Moines 3 months ago. Activated 2 days ago. Dead end? I asked, feeling my heart sink. Not quite, Miller said. The phone was purchased with cash. Smart. But the minutes? The minutes were topped up online yesterday. And the user paid for the top-up using a credit card? No. They used a loyalty rewards point redemption from a grocery chain account to cover the transaction fee. I stared at the speakerphone. Which grocery chain? I asked. Hy-Vee, Miller said. The account is registered to a Marianne Morgan. Silence filled the room. It was such a mundane, petty detail. My mother, a woman who obsessed over appearances and control, had exposed herself because she wanted to save $5 on a transaction fee using her grocery points. She was so arrogant, so convinced of her own untouchability, that she hadn't bothered to separate her digital footprints. It is not a smoking gun for the call itself. Sienna said, leaning back, a defense lawyer could argue someone else used her rewards number, but it is a direct link between the phone that made the defamatory call and your mother's financial life. It connects the dots. The circle is tightening. Eliana, I felt a grim satisfaction, but it was quickly overshadowed by what I found that night. I was back in my apartment, running a search on my own name. I had set up new alerts, deeper ones, using tools Sienna had recommended. I was looking for the phrase, Eliana Morgan theft. I found something on a Glassdoor-style forum for HR professionals, a site where recruiters swapped anonymous tips about high-risk candidates. It was a dark corner of the internet, technically against compliance rules but widely used. There was no name attached, but there was a submission from 6 months ago, right around the time I cut contact. Candidate warning, PA/Midwest region, E. Morgan, Ops Management, red flag, history of cash. Drawer discrepancy. Do not trust with petty cash. I stared at the screen. Cash drawer discrepancy. I searched the phrase. I found 2 more submissions on different hiring portals, all anonymous, all using that exact wordings. It made no sense. Oh. I worked in operations. I managed logistics, supply chains, vendor contracts worth millions. I hadn't worked a job with a physical cash drawer since I was 16 and working at a movie theater concession stand. Cash drawer discrepancy was a retail term. It was small time. It was specific. Why that phrase? I wondered. If you are going to lie about a corporate manager, you accuse them of embezzlement or wire fraud. You don't accuse them of skimming $20 from a till. I printed the screenshots. I put them in the binder. The next day, I went to Maple Hollow. I found Lorraine in the garden, wrapped in a thick wool blanket. The air was getting colder. Winter was coming to Marrow Glen. Grandma, I said, sitting on the bench beside her. I showed her the papers. Why do they keep saying cash drawer? It doesn't fit my resume. It looks weird to anyone who actually hires for my level. Lorraine put on her glasses. She looked at the phrase. Then she let out a short, dry laugh. Of course, she said. What? Your mother? Lorraine said. She worked, briefly, in 1984. Marianne worked? I asked. My mother had always presented herself as a woman of leisure, a philanthropist who was too busy for a 9-to-5. For 6 months, Lorraine said. She was a bookkeeper for a boutique in Des Moines. She was fired. Why? I asked. Cash drawer discrepancies. Lorraine said. She wasn't stealing. Necessarily. She was just sloppy. She couldn't make the numbers balance, and she kept trying to move money around to hide it. The owner let her go. It was a huge humiliation for her. She never spoke of it again. I stared at the paper. She is projecting. Lorraine nodded. She is using the language of her own shame to paint you. To her, cash drawer discrepancy sounds like the ultimate professional sin because it is the one she committed. She doesn't realize that in your world. It sounds ridiculous. It is her fingerprint. Eliana. Only Marianne would use those words. It was a breakthrough, but it didn't pay the rent. I went home to a notice on my door. Lease renewal opportunity. My lease was up in 3 weeks. If I didn't renew, I had to move. If I renewed, I needed to prove income. I checked my bank balance, $300. I had been living on rice and beans for weeks. I had sold my designer handbags. I had canceled every subscription. But the math was the math. I was drowning. A friend from college, Jules, called me that night. Ellie, let me send you $2,000. She said, please, you can pay me back whenever. I held the phone, tears stinging my eyes. It was so tempting. It would buy me a month. It would let me breathe. I can't. Jules, I said, why? It's not charity. It's a loan. Because if I take it, I am doing exactly what they said I would do. I said, they told everyone I am bad with money. They told everyone I am a leech. If I start borrowing from friends to survive, I become the disaster they are describing. I have to stand on my own feet, even if my feet are bleeding. I hung up and stared at the ceiling. I was terrified. I was 33, educated, experienced, and I was about to be homeless because 2 people in Iowa decided I needed to be taught a lesson. I went to Lorraine the next day. I didn't want to tell her. I didn't want to burden her. But she took one look at my face and knew. Money? She asked. Rent, I said. I can't sign the renewal. I don't have the proof of income. Lorraine nodded. She didn't reach for her checkbook. That wasn't her way. Instead, she reached into her bag and pulled out a thick legal folder. We are going to execute the next phase of the trust, she said. The trust? I asked. I thought that was for when you passed. The Hale Family Trust is a living entity, Lorraine said, and it needs an administrator. She opened the folder. I am hiring you, she said. Hiring me? As the administrator of the Hale Family Trust, it is a legitimate role. You will manage my correspondence, audit the facility bills, handle the filings with Sienna, and oversee the small investment portfolio I kept separate from your father's grubby hands. She slid a contract across the table. It pays a monthly stipend, she said. It is not a fortune, but it is enough to satisfy a landlord. And it is legal income. You will pay taxes on it. You will receive a pay stub. I looked at the contract. Administrator. Eliana Morgan. Grandma. I said, This is a job, she said firmly. And there is a clause. Read Section 4. I looked at Section 4. Interference clause. In the event that any third party attempts to interfere with the employment or duties of the administrator, the trustee is authorized and directed to release the full unredacted historical financial records of the trust to the appropriate legal authorities for mediation. What does this mean? I asked. It means, Lorraine said, a wicked glint in her eye, that if your parents try to sabotage this job, if they call me or the bank and claim you are stealing from the trust automatically releases the documents proving that your father committed tax fraud in 1998. I gasped. He did? Lorraine patted my hand. He thought he was clever. He wasn't. I paid the difference to keep him out of jail for your mother's sake, but I kept the records. If they come for you here, they aren't just attacking their daughter. They are pulling the pin on a grenade that blows up their own social standing. I signed the contract. My hand was steady. I took the employment letter to my landlord the next day. He accepted it. I signed the lease. I was safe. But safety is fragile. 2 days later, I was at Maple Hollow, sitting in the small office Lorraine had commandeered for me to work in. I was actually organizing her receipts, taking the job seriously, when I heard a commotion in the hallway, a voice I knew better than my own. I demand to see her. It is my mother. You cannot keep a daughter from her mother. Marianne. She was here, in Pennsylvania. My stomach dropped to the floor. I stood up, smoothing my blazer. I walked into the hallway. Marianne was standing at the nurse's station. She was wearing a camel-colored coat that probably cost more than my car. Her hair was perfect. She was holding a massive bouquet of lilies, flowers Lorraine was allergic to. She was performing. She was the distraught, loving daughter fighting through bureaucracy. "Mom," I said. She spun around. Her eyes locked on mine. For a second, just a split second, I saw the cold calculation. Then, the mask slipped into place. "Ellie!" she cried. She rushed toward me, arms open. "Oh, thank God. We have been so worried. You look terrible. You look so thin." She tried to hug me. I took a step back. I didn't flinch. I didn't cringe. I just stepped out of range. "Hello." "Mother," I said. My voice was calm, low, controlled. "What are you doing here?" "I came to save you," she said, loud enough for the staff to hear. "And to see poor Mother. We heard she was declining. We heard you were stressing her." She looked around at the nurses, seeking an audience. "I just want to make sure my mother is safe." Marianne said to a passing aide, "My daughter, she has been having a hard time. We are very concerned about her stability." The aide looked uncomfortable. I stood my ground. I didn't scream. I didn't defend myself. I remembered what Sienna had said. "Let them perform. You be the rock. Grandma is fine." I said, "She is in the solarium. But she is allergic to lilies." "Mother, you know that." Marianne looked at the flowers. "Oh, these?" I just grabbed them. I was so frantic to get here. She dropped the flowers on a side table. "I need to see her," Marianne said. "I need to make sure you haven't coerced her into anything." She pushed past me. I followed her. We walked into the solarium. Lorraine was there, playing chess with a neighbor. She looked up. When she saw Marianne, her face turned to stone. "Marianne." Lorraine said, "Mother." Marianne rushed over, kneeling beside the chair. "Oh, look at you. You look frail. Has she been taking care of you? Has she been asking for money?" Marianne grabbed Lorraine's hands. Lorraine pulled her hands away. "I am fine." "Marianne," Lorraine said, "and Eliana is working. She is my administrator." "Working?" Marianne laughed. It was a sharp, jagged sound. "Ellie can't manage a checkbook." "Mother, she is likely skimming off the top. You have to be careful. She is desperate." She said it, right there in the open, in front of the chess partner, in front of the staff member who had followed us in. I stood by the door. I didn't say a word. I just watched. "Excuse me," a voice said. We all turned. It was Carmen Dwyer, the facility's social worker. She was a tall woman with no-nonsense glasses and a clipboard. She had been standing in the doorway, listening. "Mrs. Morgan?" Carmen said. Marianne stood up, smoothing her coat. "Yes, I am her daughter. I am here to—" "You are disrupting the residence," Carmen said calmly, "and I just heard you accuse your daughter of financial abuse in a common area. That is a serious allegation." "It is true," Marianne said, lowering her voice to a stage whisper. "She has a history. I am just trying to protect my mother." Carmen looked at me. I was standing still, hands at my sides, face blank. I looked like the definition of stability. Then she looked at Marianne, who was flushed, frantic, and scattering pollen from the lilies she had dragged back up. I am documenting this interaction. Carmen said, Maple Hollow takes resident safety very seriously. That includes protection from family conflict. Good, Marianne said. Document that I am here to save her. I am documenting, Carmen continued, her voice turning icy, that you have entered the facility and immediately caused distress to the resident. Lorraine's blood pressure is monitored. Mrs. Morgan, I can see on the chart that it spiked the moment you walked in. Marianne froze. I am going to ask you to leave for the day. Carmen said, You can schedule a supervised visit for tomorrow if Lorraine consents. Supervised? Marianne sputtered. I am her power of attorney. Actually, Lorraine said from her chair. Her voice was clear and loud. Not anymore. I revoked it last week. Marianne went pale. She looked at Lorraine, then at me. You did this. She hissed at me. You poisoned her. I didn't speak. I just looked at her. Marianne grabbed her purse. This isn't over. I will be back with my lawyers. You are manipulating a senile old woman, Eliana, and everyone knows it. She stormed out. The sound of her heels clicking on the linoleum faded away. Silence returned to the solarium. Carmen Dwyer walked over to me. Are you okay? She asked. I nodded. I am fine. Carmen tapped her clipboard. I saw what she did. Carmen said quietly, I have seen a lot of families. Eliana, I know a performance when I see one, and I know what it looks like when someone is trying to provoke a reaction. She looked me in the eye. I am filing a report. Not against you, against her. It will go into the resident file. Attempted alienation of support system. If you need a character witness for whatever legal thing you have going on, I am happy to talk to your lawyer. I felt a lump in my throat. Thank you. Carmen. I looked at Lorraine. She was trembling slightly, but she gave me a wink. Checkmate. She whispered. I went back to the small office. I sat down. My hands were shaking now that the adrenaline was fading, but I felt something new. For the first time, the world wasn't believing her. The facade was cracking. She had come here to destroy me, to paint me as the unstable thief, and instead, she had handed us a witness who saw the truth. I pulled out my phone. I had one notification. It was from Sienna. Alder Creek just got an email. Anonymous. Subject line. Integrity issue. Attached is a fake police report. We have them. Eliana, come to the office. I looked at the text. A fake police report. That was a felony. They hadn't just crossed the line. They had sprinted past it. I grabbed my bag. I looked at the binder on the desk, the proof folder. It was thick now, heavy. I walked out of Maple Hollow. The air was cold, but I didn't feel it. I felt the heat of the fire they had started, and for the first time, I knew exactly how to direct the flames. The day Sienna filed the complaint, the sky over Marrow Glen was a bruised purple, heavy with unshed rain. I sat in her office, watching her associates stack the exhibits into neat, terrifying piles. Exhibit A, the Ridgeview rejection. Exhibit B, the Alder Creek call log. Exhibit C, the affidavit of Nadine Wexler. Exhibit D, the notarized timeline of Lorraine Hale. It looked so small on the table, my entire life, my trauma, reduced to 4 inches of paper. We are filing for defamation per se, and tortious interference with economic expectancy. Sienna said, her voice crisp, we are keeping it narrow. We are not suing for emotional distress. We are not suing for pain and suffering. We are suing for lost wages and reputational damage. We want to make this about math. Eliana, math is harder to manipulate than feelings. I nodded. I felt a strange numbness. It was the calm before the artillery fire began. Are you ready? She asked. Once I send this to the court clerk, it becomes public record. They will be served within 48 hours. Do it, I said. Sienna hit a key on her laptop. A small whoosh sound signaled the email was sent. It was done. I had officially sued my parents. The silence that followed lasted for 3 days. Then, the counteroffensive arrived. It came in the form of a legal response filed by a high-priced firm in Des Moines. representing Marianne and Clive Morgan. Sienna called me in immediately. They are moving to dismiss, Sienna said, sliding a document across the desk, and they are filing a counterclaim. A counterclaim? I asked, picking up the paper. For what? Conversion. Sienna said, that is the legal term for theft. I read the document. My heart hammered against my ribs. Defendant asserts that plaintiff, Eliana Morgan, unlawfully removed property from the family home in June of 2015, specifically a set of vintage Mikomoto pearls and a sapphire brooch, with an estimated value of $12,000. Defendants contend that plaintiff's current financial instability is a continuation of a pattern of misappropriation of family assets. I dropped the paper. They are accusing me of stealing my own graduation presents? I whispered. The air left the room. Those were gifts, I said, my voice rising. Grandma gave them to me. Marianne knows that. She was there when I opened the box. Can you prove it? Sienna asked. I stared at her. Prove a gift from 8 years ago? Who keeps receipts for a decade? They are counting on that, Sienna said. They are dirtying the water. They want to make it look like a domestic dispute over property. She says we slandered her. We say she stole our jewelry. It creates a he said, she said dynamic that makes a judge want to throw the whole thing out. I felt the panic rising, that familiar, suffocating feeling that I was crazy, that I remembered things wrong. Maybe I had taken them? No. Lorraine had handed me the velvet box at dinner. I need to call Grandma. I said, we got Lorraine on speakerphone. I read her the allegation. The pearls? Lorraine asked. Her voice was dry, unbothered. The ones I bought at an estate sale in 1999? Yes, I said. They say I stole them. Lorraine let out a sharp sigh. Eliana, go to the safety deposit box, she said. Look in the blue envelope. I drove to the bank. I opened the box. I found the blue envelope. Inside were photos. There was a picture of me in my cap and gown, smiling, wearing the pearls. On the back, in Lorraine's handwriting, Eliana, graduation day, 2015. Pearls, a gift from Grandma. And behind the photo, stapled to a piece of cardstock, was the original receipt from the jeweler. Dated 2 weeks before my graduation. Sold to Lorraine Hale. I stared at the receipt. She had kept it. She had labeled the photo. I drove back to Sienna's office. I slammed the photo and receipt onto the desk. Exhibit E. I said. Sienna looked at them. She smiled. A shark-like baring of teeth. This is perfect, she said. Not just because it clears you, but because it proves they are lying in a court filing. That is perjury. Eliana, they just handed us a weapon. The discovery phase began. It was a slow, grinding process of exchanging documents. We sent over my employment rejections. They sent over thousands of emails. They tried to bury us. It is a common tactic called a document dump. They sent every email they had ever written that even mentioned my name, hoping we would miss the needle in the haystack. But Sienna had junior associates, and I had obsession. I spent nights in her conference room, drinking stale coffee, reading through years of digital chatter between my parents. It was mostly mundane, recipes, golf schedules, complaints about neighbors, but then, on the third night, I found it. It was an email from Clive to Marianne. Dated 6 months ago. The subject line was simply, draft. I opened it. Marianne. The email read, here's the script for the next round. Keep it brief. Do not sound angry. Sound worried. Remember, you are a mother at her wit's end. Script. Hello. I am calling about Eliana Morgan. I am her aunt. I just wanted to verify if she is handling any financial accounts. We have had some trouble in the family with missing funds, and I would hate for it to happen to you. She is a sweet girl, but she has a compulsion. Target list. 1. Ridgeview. Logistics. Operations Director. 2. Northline Medical. Asked for HR. 3. Hearth and Harbor. General Inbox. I froze. I read it again. I am her aunt. They were coordinating the lies. Clive was writing the scripts. He was coaching her on the tone. Sound worried. I scrolled down. There was more. If she gets a job, she will not come back. Clive wrote, "We need to make sure the door stays closed until she realizes she needs us. Once she is back on the payroll, we can stop." I felt a cold chill radiate from my stomach to my fingertips. Once she is back on the payroll, it wasn't about the money, it wasn't about the theft, it was about the leash. They didn't want my money. They wanted my dependence. They were terrified that if I succeeded on my own, I would never need them again. And if I didn't need them, they couldn't control me. I printed the email. My hands were shaking. I walked into Sienna's office the next morning. "I found the smoking gun," I said. Sienna read the email. She read it twice. "This is it," she said softly. "This proves intent. It proves malice. And it proves conspiracy. Clive isn't just a bystander. He is the director." She looked up at me. "We have them, Eliana. But be prepared. When they realize we have this, they are going to panic." I went to see Lorraine that afternoon. I needed to see her face when I told her. I showed her the email. Lorraine read Clive's words. "If she gets a job, she will not come back," and closed her eyes. "I knew it," she whispered. "Grandma," I said, "there is something else." In the discovery files, there were old financial records of Dad's business from 10 years ago. Lorraine stiffened. "I saw a transfer." I said, "From your trust to his business account, $50,000. The memo line just said, 'Settlement.'" Lorraine sighed. She took off her glasses and rubbed the bridge of her nose. "I wondered if you would find that," she said. "What was it?" I asked. "That was the same year they accused me of stealing the Christmas money." Lorraine looked out the window at the gray garden. "Your father. He is not a good businessman," she said. "He talks a big game, but he takes risks. Stupid risks. That year, he took money from an investor to fund a project that didn't exist. He spent it. The investor found out and threatened to go to the police." I stared at her. "Dad committed fraud?" "He called it a misunderstanding," Lorraine said bitterly. "But yes, it was fraud. If he had been charged, it would have ruined him. It would have ruined Marianne's social standing. So, they came to me. They begged. And you paid it?" "I paid it," Lorraine said. "To keep the family name out of the papers. But the stress, the tension in the house was unbearable. Clive was terrified. He needed a distraction. He needed to feel powerful again, so he accused me. I realized. The realization hit me like a physical blow. He needed a scapegoat. Lorraine said, "He needed a thief in the house so that he wasn't the thief. It is a psychological trick called projection. He pinned his own shame on you. And Marianne went along with it because if you were the problem, then her husband wasn't a criminal." I sat there, processing the enormity of it. My entire adult identity, the black sheep, the untrustworthy daughter, was constructed to cover up my father's felony. I was the collateral damage of his ego. "They sacrificed me," I whispered. "They did," Lorraine said. "But now we have the receipts." The court ordered mediation. It was a mandatory step before trial, a last-ditch effort to settle without a jury. We met in a neutral office building in downtown Marrow Glen. The conference room was beige and airless. On one side of the long table sat me, Sienna, and Lorraine. On the other side sat Marianne, Clive, and their attorney, a slick man in a pinstripe suit named Mr. Sterling. Marianne looked perfect. She was wearing a navy suit, her hair coiffed, her makeup tasteful. Clive looked older, grayer, his eyes refusing to meet mine. The mediator, a retired judge named Harriet Vance, sat at the head of the table. "We are here to see if we can find a resolution," Judge Vance said. "Mr. Sterling cleared his throat. "My clients are heartbroken," he began. "This is a family matter that has spiraled out of control. Mr. and Mrs. Morgan love their daughter. They admit that perhaps overzealous concern led to some misunderstandings with employers, but they deny any malicious intent." He slid a paper across the table. "They are willing to offer a settlement," he said. "They will pay Eliana's legal fees up to $5,000. They will agree to stop contacting employers. In exchange, Eliana will drop the suit, sign a non-disclosure agreement, and issue a joint statement acknowledging that the misunderstanding has been resolved amicably. I looked at the paper. Non-disclosure agreement, amicably. They wanted to buy my silence. They wanted to bury the evidence I had found. I looked at Marianne. She was dabbing her eyes with a tissue. "Ellie, please," she said, her voice trembling. "We just want this to be over. We want our daughter back. We can put this all behind us. We can help you. We can set you up in an apartment. You don't have to live like this. It was a good performance. If I hadn't read the email where Clive told her to sound worried, I might have believed it." I leaned forward. "I don't want your money," I said, "and I don't want an apartment. I want my name back." "Mr. Sterling sighed. "Mrs. Morgan, litigation is expensive and public. Do you really want to drag your parents through a trial?" "Do they want to be dragged?" Sienna countered. "We have the emails. Mr. Sterling, we have the scripts. We have the proof that Clive coached Marianne to impersonate an aunt. We have the proof of the false police report sent to Alder Creek." Clive flinched. "Mr. Sterling stiffened. "We dispute the interpretation of those documents." Marianne looked at me. The tears stopped. Her eyes narrowed. "Why are you doing this?" "Ellie," she asked, "after everything we gave you? Private schools, cars, we gave you everything, and you sue us? You are so ungrateful." The word hung in the air. "Ungrateful. There it is," I said softly. "Excuse me?" Marianne snapped. "You just said it. I said, ungrateful. That is what this is about. You think I owe you my life because you paid for it, but I paid for it too. Mom, I paid for it with my reputation." Marianne slammed her hand on the table. "We protected you," she shouted. "You were a mess. You couldn't handle money." Lorraine stood up. The sound of her chair scraping against the floor was loud in the small room. Everyone turned to look at her. Lorraine was 82. But in that moment, she looked 10 feet tall. "Sit down." "Marianne," Lorraine said. Marianne blinked. "Mother, don't get involved. I am involved." Lorraine said, "I am the one who paid for Clive's fraud in 2014. The room went dead silent. Clive's face drained of color. "I beg your pardon?" "Mr. Sterling asked, looking at his client. $50,000, Lorraine said, "to cover the investor funds you stole. Clive, I have the bank transfer. I have the letter you wrote me begging for help." She reached into her bag and pulled out the USB drive. "And I have this," she said, "my recorded statement from the night you accused Eliana of stealing the Christmas money, the night I found it taped under your desk." She placed the drive on the table. "This isn't a family conflict," Lorraine said to the mediator. "This is a hostage situation, and the hostage has escaped." Marianne looked at Clive. Clive looked at the table. The silence was heavy, suffocating. They realized, finally, that they were not in control. Lorraine had outflanked them. Judge Vance looked at the USB drive, then at Mr. Sterling. "I suggest we take a recess," Judge Vance said. We sat in a separate breakout room. My hands were shaking. "You did it. Grandma," I said. "You shut them down." Lorraine looked tired. Her hands were trembling slightly. "It gives me no joy." "Eliana," she said, "to see my own daughter so twisted by him." But it had to be done. My phone buzzed. I looked at it. It was David from Alder Creek Systems. "Eliana, can you talk?" I stepped into the hallway. "Hi, David," I said. "Eliana," David said. "Look, I shouldn't be telling you this. Legal would kill me, but we got another anonymous email today. A fake police report." I closed my eyes. "They are still doing it? Even during mediation?" David paused. "No, this one was dated 3 days ago. It just got through the spam filter. But here's the thing, Eliana. We traced the IP. It matches the previous one. We know it is fake. The formatting is wrong. The badge number doesn't exist." "Okay," I said. "So I assume the offer is gone." "Actually," David said. "No." I blinked. "What?" "Our CEO looked at it," David said, "and then he looked at your interview notes. And he looked at the cease and desist your lawyer sent us a copy of. He said, I don't like bullies. David took a breath. We are offering you the job. Eliana, operations manager. Starting salary is $5,000 more than we discussed. But it is conditional. Conditional on what? Conditional on you resolving this. David said, we can't have your family harassing our HR department forever. We need a legal injunction. If you can get a court order telling them to back off. The job is yours. I felt tears prick my eyes. It was the first time a stranger had looked at the mess and chosen to believe me. Thank you. David, I said, I will get the order. I walked back into the breakout room. They offered me the job. I told Sienna and Lorraine. Sienna smiled. That is our leverage. Now we don't just have a claim for past damages. We have a claim for immediate future harm if they don't stop. We can demand the injunction as part of the settlement, but I hesitated. If I take the job, I said, and they find out, they will go nuclear. They will call every vendor, every client. Not if we bind them. Sienna said. We went back into the mediation room. Mr. Sterling looked disheveled. Clive and Marianne were sitting far apart, not looking at each other. We have a new proposal. Sienna said. She laid it out. 1. A permanent injunction preventing Marianne or Clive from contacting any current, past, or future employer of Eliana Morgan. 2. A formal, written retraction sent to Ridgeview, Northline, and Hearth and Harbor, admitting that the information provided was false. 3. A monitored no-contact order for 5 years. And in exchange? Mr. Sterling asked. In exchange, Sienna said. We do not release the evidence of Clive's past financial fraud to the district attorney, and we do not go to trial, where this email chain regarding the Ant script becomes public record. Marianne gasped. You would send your father to jail? He committed a crime. Mother, I said, just like you committed perjury in your filing about the pearls. Marianne looked at me. Her eyes were wide, fearful. She looked small. Mister? Sterling whispered to them. Clive nodded rapidly. He wanted out. He wanted to save his own skin, but Marianne hesitated. To sign the retraction, she whispered. To write a letter saying I lied? Yes. I said, I can't, she said. People will see it. The HR directors, they talk. That is the point. I said, you destroyed my name to save your image. Now you have to sacrifice your image to save my name. Marianne looked at the paper. Her hand hovered over the pen. She was trembling. If I sign this, she said, her voice barely a whisper, I am admitting I am a bad mother. I looked at her. I felt a pang of pity, but it was distant, like looking at a stranger through a telescope. You are admitting you made a mistake, I said. Whether you are a bad mother is a question for your conscience, not the court. She looked at Clive. He wouldn't look at her. He had abandoned her to save himself, just like he had abandoned me 10 years ago. She looked at the retraction letter. I, Marianne Morgan, knowingly provided false information. She stared at the words. I need a moment. She said, I can't breathe. She stood up and walked to the window. She pressed her forehead against the glass. We waited. The tension in the room was thick enough to choke on. Eliana, she said, without turning around, if I sign this, will you ever come home? I looked at her back. I looked at the rigid set of her shoulders. No. Mom, I said. She flinched. Then I have lost everything, she whispered. You lost me a long time ago. I said, you just didn't notice until I stopped paying for your validation. She turned around. Her face was hard again. The vulnerability was gone. Fine, she said. She walked back to the table. She picked up the pen. But know this, Eliana, you are destroying this family. I am saving myself. I said. She signed. Sienna took the paper immediately. It is done, Sienna said. We walked out of the building. The rain had finally started to fall, washing the gray streets of Marrow Glen. I stood on the sidewalk with Lorraine. I held the signed agreement in my hand. I had the job. I had the retraction. I had won, but I didn't feel triumphant. I felt hollow. I had severed the limb to save the body, but I was still bleeding. I looked at Lorraine. "Is it always this quiet after a war?" I asked. Lorraine took my arm. "Only until the rebuilding starts," she said. I looked at the rain. I had my identity back. Now I just had to figure out who Eliana Morgan was when she wasn't fighting to exist. I went home. I sat at my laptop. I opened a blank document. I wasn't going to post it. Not yet. Maybe never. But I needed to write it. To whom it may concern. My name is Eliana Morgan. For 10 years. I have been defined by a story that wasn't mine. I was the thief, the liability, the problem. Today, I killed that story. I am not a thief. I am a survivor of a different kind of robbery. The kind where they steal your reality before they steal your reputation. I typed until my fingers ached. I poured it all out. The Christmas money, the pearls, the scripts, the emails. I saved the file. I named it The Truth. I closed the laptop. I had the retraction letters. Sienna would mail them tomorrow. Ridgeview would see them. Northline would see them. But there was one loose end. Lorraine had handed me one last envelope before I left her tonight. "Only if you think they will do this to someone else," she had said. I looked at the envelope on my desk. It was sealed. I picked it up. It felt heavy. I wondered what was inside. I wondered if I had the strength to open it. I had won the battle, but looking at that envelope, I had a terrible feeling that the war wasn't over. It had just moved to a new front. The days leading up to the hearing were a blur of nausea and paperwork. I sat in my small apartment, wearing the same gray sweatpants I had worn for 3 days, staring at the ceiling. The injunction hearing was scheduled for Tuesday. It was supposed to be the end. It was supposed to be the moment the judge looked at the evidence and told my parents to stop destroying my life. But I was terrified. I wasn't scared of losing the case. Sienna was confident. We had the law on our side. I was scared of the courtroom itself. I was scared of the public record. I was scared that even if I won, I would forever be the woman who sued her parents. In the court of public opinion, the child who fights back is often painted as the problem. Why couldn't she just make peace? Why is she so difficult? I could hear the whispers already. Eliana Morgan, the family problem. On Sunday night, 2 days before the hearing. My laptop pinged. I almost ignored it. I had trained myself to flinch at every notification, expecting another rejection letter or another caustic email from my mother. But this one was different. The subject line was, "Did you mean to send this?" It was from a woman named Karen Vost. I didn't know a Karen Vost. I opened it. "Dear Ms. Morgan, I own a small boutique recruiting firm in Des Moines. Your mother, Marianne, contacted me yesterday regarding your potential candidacy for a role I am not even hiring for. She was very insistent that I know about your history before I considered you. However, she attached a file that I do not think she intended for me to see. It looks like an internal document. I opened it, thinking it was your resume. When I realized what it was, I felt sick. I do not know you, but nobody deserves this. I am forwarding it to you. Do with it what you will." Attached was an Excel spreadsheet. The file name was Leverage Plan V4.x LSX. My hand hovered over the trackpad. Leverage Plan. It sounded so corporate, so calculated. I clicked open. The screen filled with rows and columns. I gasped. The air leaving my lungs in a sharp hiss. It was a master list. Column A, target employer. Column B, contact method. Phone/email/portal. Column C, script variation. Aunt/concerned neighbor. Anonymous. Column D, status. Poisoned, pending. Rejected. Column E, Eliana's reaction. I scrolled down, my eyes widening in horror. They had documented everything. Ridgeview Logistics. Status, poisoned, reaction. Eliana called Marianne crying. Northline Medical. Status, poisoned, reaction. Eliana went silent. There were notes in the margins. Keep pressure on. She sounds desperate. Wait 2 more weeks before offering the loan. It wasn't just a smear campaign, it was a project. I was a project. They were tracking my emotional devastation like it was a quarterly earnings report. They were measuring their success by how much I suffered. I saw the entry for the volunteer board, community center, method, email from Clive, status, board notified, objective, cut off social support. I felt bile rise in my throat. I ran to the bathroom and retched. They weren't just reacting to my independence. They were architects of my ruin. They had sat down at a computer, probably with cups of coffee, and updated this spreadsheet. They had discussed it. Did we poison the well at Hearth and Harbor yet? No. Do that on Tuesday. I wiped my mouth and walked back to the computer. I forwarded the email to Sienna. 10 minutes later, Sienna called. "My God," she said. Her voice was low, dangerous. "It is a leverage plan." I whispered, "I am just a line item to them." "Eliana," Sienna said, and I could hear the fierce grin in her voice. "This is not just evidence. This is the end of them. They just handed us the nail for the coffin, and they handed us the hammer too." The courtroom was cold. It smelled of floor wax and old wood. I sat at the plaintiff's table next to Sienna. I wore my charcoal blazer, the one I had bought for the Alder Creek interview. I sat with my back straight, my hands clasped on the table to stop them from shaking. On the other side, my parents sat with Mr. Sterling. Marianne was wearing a pastel pink suit, a cross necklace visible at her throat. She looked small, fragile, the picture of a grieving mother dragged into court by a rebellious child. Clive sat next to her, staring at his shoes. The judge, the Honorable Evelyn Greer, took the bench. She was a stern woman with reading glasses perched on the end of her nose. "We are here to hear the motion for a permanent injunction," Judge Greer said. "Proceed." Sienna stood up. "Your Honor," she began, her voice filling the room, "this case is not about family conflict. It is about a systematic, documented campaign of tortious interference designed to render the plaintiff, Ms. Morgan, unemployable and destitute." Mr. Sterling stood up. "Objection. Your Honor. Characterization. My clients were acting out of parental concern for a daughter with a history of instability." Overruled. Judge Greer said, "Continue." Sienna called Marianne to the stand. Marianne walked up, dabbing her eyes with a tissue before she even sat down. She took the oath. "Mrs. Morgan," Sienna said, "did you contact Ridgeview Logistics regarding your daughter's employment?" I don't recall the specific name." Marianne stammered. "I called a few places. I was worried. Eliana has been so erratic. I just wanted to make sure she wasn't put in a position of responsibility she couldn't handle. I was protecting them." "And her—" "Protecting them?" Sienna asked. "By telling them she was a thief?" "I never used that word," Marianne cried, looking at the judge. "I said she had difficulties. I said there were discrepancies." Sienna walked back to the table. "Your Honor, I would like to introduce Exhibit F, a spreadsheet titled Leverage Plan, emailed by Mrs. Morgan to a third party 2 days ago." Mr. Sterling jumped up. "Objection! Surprise evidence! It was received 48 hours ago and immediately disclosed to opposing counsel." Sienna said calmly, "It goes to the heart of malice and intent." Aloud. Judge Greer said. Sienna handed the paper to Marianne. "Mrs. Morgan, is this your email address?" Marianne looked at the paper. Her face went pale. The pink flush drained away, leaving her looking gray and waxy. I don't know what this is," she whispered. "Really?" Sienna asked. "Because it lists every employer Eliana applied to, and in the column labeled Objective, for the entry on Northline Medical, it says, Force financial collapse to trigger return home." A gasp went through the courtroom. It was small, but audible. Marianne stared at the document. Her hands began to shake. "It was just notes," she said weakly. "We were just trying to keep track." "Keep track of her collapse?" Sienna pressed. "Mrs. Morgan, did you create this document?" Clive did. Marianne blurted out. Clive's head snapped up. He looked at his wife with pure betrayal. Sienna smiled. "No more questions." She called her next witness, Lorraine Hale. The bailiff opened the doors. Lorraine rolled in. She was in a wheelchair today, conserving her strength. She wore a navy blue dress and her pearls, the ones my parents claimed I had stolen. She took the stand. She didn't look at Marianne. She looked straight at the judge. Mrs. Hale, Sienna said, you are the plaintiff's grandmother. And the defendant's mother. Why are you here today? Because, Lorraine said, her voice clear and strong. I have watched my daughter and son-in-law systematically dismantle my granddaughter's life for 10 years. Can you explain? They operate on a cycle, Lorraine said. Isolate, discredit, rescue. They isolate her from her support systems. They discredit her competence, so she cannot earn a living. And then, when she is broken and hungry, they swoop in to rescue her. It is not love. It is coercive control. They treat her like a colony they need to subdue. Mr. Sterling stood up. Objection. The witness is not a psychologist. I am an eyewitness, Lorraine snapped. I lived in that house. I saw Clive hide the money under his desk in 2014 to frame her. I saw Marianne smile when Eliana lost her first job. I saw the joy they took in her failure. She turned to look at me. Her eyes were full of tears. Eliana is not a thief, Lorraine said. She is a scapegoat. She is the vessel they pour their own sins into so they can feel clean, and I will not let them do it anymore. The courtroom was silent. Judge Greer looked at Lorraine, then at the spreadsheet, then at my parents. She banged her gavel. I have heard enough, Judge Greer said. She looked at Marianne and Clive. In 20 years on the bench, the judge said, her voice icy. I have seen many family disputes. I have rarely seen such calculated, cold-blooded malice. To create a spreadsheet tracking the destruction of your own child's livelihood is abhorrent. She signed the paper in front of her. Injunction granted. You are ordered to cease all contact with any employer, past, present, or future. You are ordered to sign the retractions drafted by the plaintiff's counsel within 24 hours. And frankly, if this were criminal court, I would be looking at harassment charges. Step down. It was over. The gavel hit the wood with a sound like a gunshot. I sat there, frozen. I had won. I had the injunction. I had the vindication. But as I watched my parents huddle with their lawyer, arguing in hushed, angry whispers, I didn't feel the rush of victory. I felt a profound, aching grief. They weren't looking at me with regret. They were looking at me with hatred. They weren't sorry for what they did. They were sorry they got caught. They were sorry the spreadsheet had slipped out. I walked out of the courtroom. Sienna was beaming, high-fiving her associate. We cleaned house, she said. Eliana, that was a slaughter. I nodded. Thank you. Sienna, truly, you saved my life. I walked over to Lorraine. She was waiting by the elevator. She looked exhausted, her skin translucent under the harsh hallway lights. Are you okay? I asked her. I am fine, she said. My parents came out of the courtroom. They had to pass us to get to the exit. Clive wouldn't look at me. He walked with his head down, a beaten dog. But Marianne stopped. She looked at me, then at Lorraine. Her eyes were dry. I hope you are happy, she said to me. You have humiliated us. You have aired our dirty laundry to the world. You aired it. Mother, I said, I just turned on the light. She sneered. You will never make it on your own. You don't have the grit. You will be back. I looked at her. I really looked at her. I saw the fear behind the anger. I saw the desperate need to believe that I was incompetent because if I wasn't. Then she was just cruel. Goodbye. Marianne, I said. I didn't call her mom. I didn't call her mother. I used her name. It was a demotion. She was just a woman I used to know. She turned and walked away, her heels clicking on the marble floor. I watched them go. And in that moment, the final shackle broke. I realized that the parents I had wanted, the ones who would be proud of me, who would protect me, had never existed. I had been mourning a fantasy. The reality was walking away from me, and letting them go was the only way to survive. The aftermath was swift and brutal. The retraction letters went out the next day. Sienna sent them via certified mail to Ridgeview, Northline, Hearth and Harbor, and Alder Creek. David at Alder Creek called me the moment he got it. We got the letter. He said, "It is official. The integrity concern was a fabrication. You are cleared. Eliana, when can you start?" "Monday." I said, I started at Alder Creek a week later. Walking into that office, having a badge with my name on it, sitting at a desk that I had earned, it felt like breathing pure oxygen after holding my breath for a year. I was good at the job. I reorganized their shipping protocols in the first month. I didn't steal paper clips. I didn't have cash drawer discrepancies. I was just Eliana Morgan, operations manager, but the ripples of the case traveled further than I expected. Marrow Glen was a small ecosystem, but the legal circles in Des Moines talked. The details of the leverage plan leaked. It wasn't sealed evidence. 2 weeks after the hearing, I saw a news alert. Local Civic League suspends board member pending ethics review. It was Marianne, the Civic League, her prized social jewel. Couldn't have a board member who had been judicially found to have engaged in calculated malice and fraud against her own daughter. She was suspended. The social capital she had hoarded for decades evaporated overnight. Then came Clive, his professional association. The Midwest Business Alliance opened an inquiry. The revelation about the old fraud, the $50,000 Lorraine had covered, had started whispers. He wasn't charged, but he was radioactive. His partners bought him out for pennies on the dollar just to get his name off the letterhead. They were alone in their big house, surrounded by the silence they had tried to impose on me. I lived my life. I visited Lorraine every Tuesday and Thursday. We drank tea. We didn't talk about them. We talked about books. We talked about my job. We talked about the future. But there was one final piece of business. One rainy afternoon, 3 months after the hearing, Lorraine handed me a thick manila envelope. It was the one she had kept in the back of the safety deposit box. "Only if you think they'll do this to someone else." I looked at it. "Grandma," I said, "it is over. We won. Why do I need this?" "Because," Lorraine said, her voice grave, "winning for yourself is one thing, but you need to know what you are dealing with. You need to know that you weren't the first." I froze. "What do you mean?" "Open it." I broke the seal. Inside was a file from 12 years ago. It was a personnel file from one of Clive's old shell companies. A girl named Sarah Jenkins. She was 22, fresh out of college. I read the termination letter. Reason for termination: theft of petty cash, lack of integrity. I read the notes attached. They were in Marianne's handwriting. She is getting too close to Clive. She is asking too many questions about the accounts. We need to cut her loose. Use the theft story. It always works. My hands shook. There was a letter from Sarah, sent to the company a week after she was fired. "Please," she wrote, "I didn't take anything. I can't get another job. You are ruining my life. Please just tell the truth." There was no response in the file. Just a note from Clive. "Ignore. She has no resources. She will go away." I looked up at Lorraine. "They did this to her?" I asked. "To a stranger?" She was an assistant. Lorraine said, "She was smart. She noticed that the numbers didn't add up. The same fraud I eventually paid for. When she started asking questions, they panicked. They didn't just fire her. They destroyed her credibility so that if she ever went to the police, she would look like a disgruntled, thieving employee." "What happened to her?" I asked. Lorraine looked down. She moved back to Ohio. She ended up working in a diner. She never used her degree. It broke her. Eliana. She didn't have a grandmother to save her. I stared at the photo of Sarah Jenkins attached to the file. She looked like me. Young, hopeful. I felt a cold rage settle in my chest. Different from the anger I had felt for myself. This was heavier. This wasn't just about a dysfunctional family. This was about predators. My parents were predators who used reputation destruction as a weapon to cover their tracks. They had ruined this girl to hide their crimes. And then they had turned the weapon on me to hide their insecurity. Lorraine watched me. "The injunction protects you," she said, "but it doesn't help Sarah. And it doesn't warn the next girl. I held the envelope. If I release this, if I gave this to a journalist, or sent it to the professional association investigating Clive, it wouldn't just be a scandal. It would be a detonation. It would prove a pattern of racketeering and fraud. It would strip them of everything: their house, their friends, their remaining dignity. It would be the nuclear option. But if I kept it quiet, then Sarah never gets justice, and my parents get to keep their secrets, sitting in their house, telling themselves they were just concerned parents. I stood up. I walked to the window of Lorraine's room. The rain was stopping. A sliver of sun was breaking through the clouds over Marrow Glen. I thought about the spreadsheet, leverage plan. I thought about Sarah's letter. Please just tell the truth. I thought about the thief label they had branded me with. I realized I had a choice. I could be the daughter who survived and walked away, or I could be the woman who burned the factory down so they could never manufacture another lie again. I turned back to Lorraine. "Do you have Sarah's current address?" I asked. Lorraine smiled. A small, fierce smile. "I do," she said. I put the envelope in my bag. I wasn't going to just release it. I was going to find Sarah. I was going to give her the proof she had waited 12 years for. And then, together, we were going to decide how loud the explosion should be. I walked out of Maple Hollow. The air was crisp and clean. I got into my car and placed the envelope on the passenger seat. It was time to finish it. Not for me, for her. I started the engine and drove toward the highway. The road was open. And for the first time in my life, I wasn't looking in the rearview mirror. I was looking ahead, and I was bringing the storm with me. Thank you so much for listening to My Parents Told Every Employer I Was a Thief. Grandma had already prepared for that. It has been an emotional journey writing Eliana's story, and I hope her victory resonates with you. I'm curious, where are you tuning in from today? Let me know in the comments below. I love seeing how far these stories travel. If you enjoyed this story and want more tales of dramatic revenge and family secrets exposed, please make sure to subscribe to the Revenge Stories channel. Don't forget to hit the like button and share your thoughts in English in the comments. Would you have released the final envelope? I'd love to hear what you would do in Eliana's shoes. Until next time, keep your receipts.